Hello everyone. First of all, Happy New Year. It is a new year, so I figured I'd start it off by doing something that people often ask me to do, and that is put a small list together of premiums that I recommend. I'm not gonna bother going through all of them. I've done that before and I've ranked them all based on rating and so forth and my personal opinion. No, I'm gonna take 10 premiums that I consider extremely good and 10 premiums that I consider you can't really go wrong with right now. If you pick them, if you have a really bad experience, it's because A, you have no idea how to play the ship, B, it doesn't fit your style at all, but the ship itself will no doubt be strong. Starting off, we have, of course, the Missouri. The Missouri will hold my absolute. Well, it's been ranked among my god tier premiums for ever since it came out, basically, and it still is ranked as the absolute number one. In fact, its value has probably risen with the inclusion of deepwater torps, which are pretty much undodgeable. The ability to radar destroyers and the ability to zone out destroyers with this radar is incredibly powerful. 35-second radar, 9.45 km range. Stupidly powerful tool, especially against these undodgeable torps, and being able to deal with DDs yourself without relying on your or having to rely on your teammates is incredibly potent. Also, of course, it has the Iowa AA, or very close to it, which is very powerful, and with the recent buffs to midways and in general, carriers getting a lot of love as of late. Well, love and love. Wargaming's idea of love is buffing midway to ridiculous levels and then calling it balance. But because of this, strong AA is even more valuable than before. Of course, it also has great concealment and is overall just a fantastic ship. It also has the modifier, which means it earns 50% more credits than any other premium. The exception being Musashi, I think. Musashi will probably have the same bonus. Ultimately, though, I think you have about 2 months left to get the Missouri. It costs 750k free XP. After that, it's going to be removed from sale because Wargaming kind of regretted selling it for 750. That's why they're making the Musashi 920k free XP. So especially keeping that in mind, the Missouri is just a fantastic pickup to get right now. And the Musashi, while the Musashi is straight up probably overpowered for tier 9. I mean, it's a stupidly strong ship, don't get me wrong. I still don't consider it as versatile and as good as the Missouri is, and the Missouri will always hold a spot in my heart for how much money and credits and everything it can just grind. It's a fantastic ship, absolutely recommended. Tier 8 though, let's move on. Actually, let's slot this tier 8 premiums. Now there are some great ones and there are some ones and there are some garbage ones. Recommended though, I'll start off with the Kid. The Kid got my recommendation as soon as it came out, and it still has my recommendation. Fantastic AA, fantastic gun power, self-heal, great concealment. It's a great knife fighter. It has the freedom that few other DDs have, because you can fight pretty much any DD and you can survive these sudden AP penetrations from enemy battleships, or if you eat an unlucky torp, you can heal it all back. So you got fantastic sustain, carriers can't harass you because of your incredible AA. You pay for it by only having one torpedo tube, but if you like gunboating and you like knife fighting and you like in general just winning games, then the Kid is absolutely fantastic at that. For the same reason, the Loyang is a game-winning DD as well. The buff to the Hydro, it used to be significantly shorter, but they decided to buff the Hydro to 5.43 km, which makes it actually better than German Hydro of the same tier, which means if you run into a tier 8 German DD, you can out-Hydro him, and of course that means the Loyang is the best, probably the best knife fighter at tier 8. You can rush into a cap, pop Hydro, smoke yourself up, and any DD that's caught in there with you is going to get absolutely annihilated because he can't see you, you can see him, you can see his torps, and so forth. There's a reason why I have 1.5 million XP on the Loyang. I played it a ton, and it's straight up both a fun and a very powerful ship. It does not have the deep water torps. Oh, sorry, just bumped into my mic. It does not have the deep water torps, which I actually consider good because it doesn't really need them. They are slow Benson torps, but they are very useful. I think they're stock Benson torps. And finally, we have Kutuzov. Yes, the Kutuzov got nerfed. Oh no, and you can now get spotted from 7.7 km if you shoot in the smoke. Ultimately, though, the nerf was probably pretty much needed for the Kutuzov. The Kutuzov, it was straight up overpowered. I mean, I called it overpowered multiple times for good reason. 19 km range, good concealment, fantastic AA, self smoke. Just you park anywhere on the map and you burn down battleships. It doesn't matter. Other cruisers suffer from bad maps like Okinawa, Tears of the Desert, Mountain Range, like all these terrible maps for other cruisers. They're not really a problem for the Kutuzov. Kutuzov has both the range and the smoke to deal with them just fine. It has a weakness now, which means that you have to be more careful with your positioning so you don't park right next to enemy DDs who will spot you if you're firing. But what hasn't changed is that you still have 12 guns on an 8-second reload with 19 km range, 950 meter per second shell velocity, and 13%, well, with if you're running a captain, 15% fire chance. And this means you still barbecue all the battleships on the enemy team, and it's still an amazing credit and XP farmer. So if you like the whole park in the smoke and burn everyone to death, then the Kutuzov is perfect. Finally, recommended battleship for tier 8 is going to be the Alabama. It doesn't quite match up to the North Carolina in my book. That's because its accuracy is slightly worse. I think it also had slightly worse concealment, and these are very, very important things for especially random battles. But, well, very good for ranked as well. But in return, of course, it has the better torpedo belt and it has slightly better turning. Overall, though, the Alabama is a fantastic ship. It's a if you like the North Carolina, you will like the Alabama, and since it's of course a premium, it will very consistently print you credits and XP. So this ship automatically gets a recommendation for that alone. It's significantly less reliant on matchmaking and maps compared to the Tirpitz. The Tirpitz needs good maps to be able to close the distance, because if you're forced to sit at longer ranges, the Tirpitz will suffer quite heavily. The Alabama, on the other hand, well, mid to long ranges is the optimal distance for this, well, more mid-range thanks to the concealment, and it's less reliant on having a good matchmaking and good maps than the Tirpitz is. Very good ship and gets my recommendation. Those were the 4 tier 4s that I would recommend, straight up recommend right now. Key doesn't have the armor, Prince Eugen is garbage. Enterprise is pretty good if you like carriers, don't get me wrong, it can trade planes forever, which makes it pretty decent. Atago has kind of fallen off the meta. It's not a bad ship by any means, don't get me wrong, Atago isn't a bad ship, I still play it every now and then, but it doesn't deal with the current meta as well as some other ships, especially mostly because the reload on it is so damn long. At 16 seconds of reload, it can suffer quite heavily in the current meta. Anyway, let's move on. Tier 7 recommendations. That's we have covered 5 ships. Tier 7, Belfast. This is a ship I called overpowered when it came out. The smoke nerf happened, but the detectability penalty is only 5.3 kilometers in a smoke, which means it's still absolutely overpowered. Don't make no mistake, this ship is still completely stupid. For some reason, it's still able to slot this tier 8 upgrade that gives it 10% extra concealment, which means that even though it has a smoke, and even though it has 10k, well, how much? Wait, does it have 10k more health? Almost. It has like 8k more health than the Atlanta. Even though it has 8k more health than the Atlanta, even though the Citadel on it is waterline compared to Atlanta's that extends above it, it still has better concealment than the Atlanta. It has 700 meters better concealment than the Atlanta. So, I mean, Atlanta is a fun ship. I love playing the Atlanta. How much XP do I have on it? Like 800k XP. I've played Atlanta a ton. I think it's a fun ship. But when it comes to winning, consistently winning games, the Belfast is the absolute king. This ship is still broken. The ability to radar pretty much as soon as you spot it, radaring from smokes, hydro, like the health pool, the underwater citadel, the sheer firepower, 12 guns, 7.5 second reload, you burn to death anything, you're a monster. The Belfast is still absolutely stupid, and that hasn't changed at all. Absolutely still recommended ship. Another ship that gets my recommendation, which I actually enjoy significantly more than the Belfast, and one of my favorite battleships in the game, and that is the Scharnhorst. If you want to play a bit faster, a bit more fluid, than normal battleships, then Scharnhorst is your bet. It's kind of like a superbly armored cruiser with slightly worse concealment. The AA on is pretty damn good. The gunpowder is fantastic. It has torps to YOLO with. It has a turtleback and overall great armor. The thing is just a damn monster, and extremely fun to play. I have multiple commentaries on the ship. I've enjoyed it for a long time, and the Scharnhorst will always, well, I won't say always, but ever since it came out, the Scharnhorst has had my recommendation. It's a absolute top tier ship. A ship that I don't particularly enjoy, but has to nonetheless be mentioned and recommended, is the Nelson. The Nelson has access to Royal Navy heal, which means it can heal about 28k, 29k health per heal. And you have 4 heals with Superintendent, which of course means that you can refresh your entire ship 2 times. That's 2 30k a pop heals. 4 30k a pop heals that you can pop. So when it comes to sustain, you can't really compete with the Nelson. You trade evenly with it, and then you pop your heal and you heal 10k and he heals 30k. And of course that's going to end up going very pear-shaped for you. Additionally, of course, it has Royal Navy HE, which means 46% fire chance, 6.9k HE alpha. And if I remember correctly, the concealment wasn't too bad either. It has a weakness though. The Citadel actually, unlike the more stupid Royal Navy battleships that have citadels that are underwater, this one actually extends up quite significantly, so you have to be careful with showing broadsides. However, thanks to the turret setup, you can quite comfortably just sit very angled with your nose in, and you can burn to death your opponents, and if they try to do the same, you can just out-heal them. So the Nelson is an extremely strong ship. I don't particularly enjoy the playstyle, but for people who do, absolutely a top tier ship. And finally, the 2 carriers at tier 7. Both are broken. Both are extremely stupidly broken. The Saipan is broken because it has it's able to strafe without losing planes. There's a mechanic called strafe in the game, which means if you use your fighter squads and you strafe the enemy planes, you of course deal massive damage. If you get locked in, basically if an enemy fighter squad attacks your fighter squad cannot move. You're locked into the fighter battle. However, all the other carriers in the game can trade one plane and strafe out, so they can leave the lock on. So if you get locked over enemy ships, or you get locked in an awkward position or whatever, you can sacrifice a plane and strafe out. The Saipan doesn't lose the plane when it strafes out. The justification Wargaming gives is because the fighter squads are so small, it wouldn't be fair if it lost the plane doing it. This of course means that thanks to the incredible ammo reserves that the Saipan has on the squads, it can practically strafe left, right and center infinitely. Well, not infinitely, but like 10-12 times or something. And that means any other carrier trying to fight the Saipan has to deal with the Saipan strafing back and forth 24/7 and struggling to ever be able to lock him up. And if they get hit by even one strafe, they pretty much lose the aerial fight instantly. So the Saipan is pretty much broken because it has such brain-dead strafe mechanics, and it can get away with things other carriers cannot. Combine the fact that it has tier 9 planes, which are extremely fast, and it has great torpedo bombers, it's absolutely overpowered and quite stupid in that sense. Before the strafe mechanic, the Hiryu was quite evenly matched. I would say they're in the hands of experts, they're still quite evenly matched, but the Saipan's brain-dead strafe mechanic gives it such a huge edge that it has to be mentioned. Another ship that on the other carrier, the Kaiga, this one on the other hand has garbage fighter power, almost no fighter power. On the other hand, the strike potential is absurd. 6 bombers or torpedo bombers per squad, 2 squads. Manual dropping means you can delete pretty much anything in the ship, and good Kaiga players will delete anything, absolutely anything. And it doesn't matter if you're a cruiser, battleship, whatever. The only good part is the planes die pretty easily, but ultimately when it comes to sheer destructive strike power, the Kaiga is the absolute king. So those two carriers, if you like air power, go Saipan. If you like strike power, go Kaiga. Both, even though I don't particularly enjoy carriers, I have to give both of them my recommendation because they are both extremely strong. Finally, if you're on a budget and you just want a stupidly strong premium, get the Giulio Cesar. Tier 5 battleship. I recommended it when it came out and I called it overpowered. I still call it overpowered. It's stupid. It can compete with tier 7s. Great concealment, good handling, good speed, and extremely good dispersion. It's a goddamn monster. It's an absolute monster. You've like, it's very common you end up in tier 7 matchmaking and you still top the scoreboard because this thing shreds pretty much everything it comes up against. So if you're on a budget and you just want your first premium or whatever, the Julius SR is pretty much the only tier 5 you can recommend right now. Simply because it doesn't care if it ends up against tier 7 matchmaking because it's so stupidly strong. Anyway, those were my recommended ships. There are multiple other ships that are good. Don't get me wrong. I could go through all of this and mention how ships that I like. I like Leningrad. I like Bliskovica and blah 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 blah. I could go through all of them and mention how many of them I like. But ultimately, when it comes to consistent credit earners, consistent XP earners, and ships that win games, those 10 ships are the ones I will mention. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are going to have an awesome new year, and I will talk to you guys later.